Jake Thompson's hands were black with engine grease as he crawled out from under the massive cargo hauler. Another 12-hour shift in the belly of Nexus Station was finally over. The human mechanic stretched his aching back and looked around the cramped workshop that had been his world for the past 3 years. Oil stains covered every surface, and the air smelled like metal and fuel. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. Most humans who made it to the Outer Rim stations were either military, diplomats, or wealthy traders. Jake was none of those things. He was just a guy from Detroit who could fix anything with an engine. When Earth's first interstellar recruitment drive came through his neighborhood, he signed up without thinking twice. His mom cried, his dad shook his hand, and his ex-girlfriend said he was crazy. Maybe she was right. 3 years later, Jake lived in a storage room he'd converted into living quarters, ate protein bars for most meals, and sent half his paycheck back to Earth. It wasn't glamorous, but he was making more money than he ever could have back home. Plus, working on alien technology was actually pretty cool, even if most aliens treated him like he was invisible. Today felt different though. Jake had finished his work early and had some credits burning a hole in his pocket. He'd heard other mechanics talking about the markets on the upper levels. Most of the time, Jake stuck to the lower maintenance decks where humans and other working-class aliens lived. The upper levels were where the real aliens did business. The wealthy ones. The ones who looked at humans like they were some kind of interesting pet. But today, curiosity won over common sense. Jake cleaned up as best he could and took the transport lift to level 7. The moment the doors opened, he knew he was in a different world. The ceilings stretched impossibly high, and beings he'd only seen in training videos walked past like it was nothing. There were the tall, crystal-like Zephyrians who sparkled as they moved. The blob-like merchants who rolled along on hundreds of tiny legs. Even a few of the mysterious shadows, whose bodies seemed to bend light around them. The marketplace stretched out in all directions, filled with vendors selling everything imaginable. Exotic foods that glowed and moved on their own. Technology that looked more like art than machinery. Weapons that hummed with energy. And in the center of it all was a large crowd gathered around what looked like an auction. Jake pushed through the crowd, standing on his tiptoes to see over the taller aliens. On a raised platform, an auctioneer was presenting various creatures in cages. Some looked like pets, others like livestock. A few were clearly meant for heavy labor. The bidding was fast and intense, with aliens calling out prices that made Jake's head spin. Next item, the auctioneer announced in the Universal Translator's flat tone, Lot 47 from the Zephyrian breeding colonies. 2 Zephyrians wheeled out a small cage, and immediately Jake could feel the mood of the crowd change. Where before there had been excited murmurs and aggressive bidding, now there was silence. Not the good kind of silence either. The uncomfortable kind when everyone sees something they don't want to look at. Inside the cage was a small wolf-like creature, maybe 6 months old. Its fur was pure white, almost glowing under the auction lights. But Jake could see why the crowd had gone quiet. One of the creature's eyes was clouded over, milky white instead of clear. It walked with a slight limp, favoring its left front paw. By alien standards, especially Zephyrian standards, it was probably considered defective. This specimen shows clear genetic abnormalities, the auctioneer continued, his voice lacking any enthusiasm. Unsuitable for standard breeding programs. Recommended for disposal or basic labor applications only. The 2 Zephyrians who had brought the cage looked embarrassed. Jake had learned enough about their culture to know they prized physical perfection above almost everything else. To them, this little wolf represented failure. Starting bid is 50 credits, the auctioneer said, though his tone suggested even that was too generous. 50 credits. Jake made that in an hour. For a living creature it was nothing. Insulting even. The crowd shuffled uncomfortably but no hands went up. Jake watched the little wolf press itself against the back of its cage, trembling. Its good eye darted around at all the staring faces, and Jake could see intelligence there. Fear, yes, but also understanding. The creature knew it was unwanted. 40 credits. The auctioneer tried again. Still nothing. 30? Jake felt something twist in his stomach. He'd been the unwanted kid too. The one picked last for teams. The one nobody wanted to sit with at lunch. He'd grown up in a neighborhood where being different meant being a target. He knew exactly how that little wolf felt. 20 credits, surely someone can find a use for it, the auctioneer said, clearly getting frustrated. The Zephyrians beside him looked like they wanted to disappear. The creature let out a small whimper and that was it. Jake's hand shot up before his brain could stop him. 20 credits, he called out in English, then repeated it in standard Galactic. Every head in the crowd turned to stare at him. Conversation stopped. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. "We have 20 credits from the human," the auctioneer announced. "Do I hear 25? The silence stretched on. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but he didn't care. He kept his hand up and his eyes on the little wolf, who had stopped trembling and was looking directly at him. "Going once," the auctioneer said. "Going twice." He paused, clearly hoping someone else would bid. "Sold to the human for 20 credits." The crowd began to disperse, many aliens shaking their heads or making what Jake was pretty sure were jokes at his expense. The Zephyrians completed the transaction with obvious relief, practically shoving the cage at him once the credits transferred. Jake found himself alone with his purchase, wondering what the hell he'd just done. 20 credits wasn't much money, but his living space was barely big enough for himself, let alone a growing wolf. He didn't know anything about taking care of alien animals. He didn't even know what this thing ate. The little wolf looked up at him with its one good eye, and Jake felt that same protective instinct that had made him bid in the first place. "Well, buddy," he said softly, crouching down to the cage level, "I guess we're both outcasts now. Might as well stick together." The journey back to the lower levels felt like the longest ride of Jake's life. The transport lift was packed with aliens heading home from their shopping trips, and every single one of them stared at the small cage he carried. Some looked curious, others disgusted, and a few seemed genuinely confused about why a human would waste money on damaged goods. Jake ignored them all and focused on the little wolf inside the cage. The creature had stopped trembling but still pressed itself against the far corner, watching everything with that one clear eye. Every time someone got too close or made a loud noise, the wolf would flinch. It broke Jake's heart. "It's okay, little guy," Jake whispered. "Almost home." His quarters in the maintenance section were nothing special. Originally designed as a storage closet, Jake had converted it into basic living space over the past 3 years. He had a narrow bed, a small desk with his personal computer, some shelves for clothes and tools, and a tiny food preparation area. It wasn't much, but it was private and quiet. Jake set the cage down in the center of the room and sat on his bed, trying to figure out what to do next. The wolf watched him carefully, still huddled in the corner of its prison. "You're probably hungry," Jake said. "Problem is, I don't know what you eat." He pulled up the station's database on his computer and searched for information about wolves from Zephyrian colonies. What he found wasn't encouraging. Most sources just listed them as livestock or breeding stock, with basic care instructions. Feed twice daily with standard protein pellets. Provide adequate water. Maintain clean living space. Nothing about their intelligence or behavior. But Jake had always been good at figuring things out on his own. He opened the cage slowly, ready to slam it shut if the wolf tried to bolt. Instead, the creature just watched him with intense curiosity. Jake reached in carefully and lifted the wolf out. It was lighter than he expected, probably undernourished. "There we go," Jake said softly, setting the wolf down on his bed. "Much better than that cage." For the first time, Jake got a good look at his new companion. The wolf was beautiful, despite what the Zephyrians thought. Its white fur was incredibly soft, and the clouded eye gave it a mysterious, almost mystical appearance. The limp was barely noticeable when it wasn't stressed. "You need a name," Jake said. "How about Ghost? You're pale as one." The wolf tilted its head at the sound, ears perking up. It was definitely listening. Jake went to his food supplies and found some dried meat from his rations. He offered a small piece to Ghost, who sniffed it carefully before eating. Good sign. At least human food wasn't poisonous to him. Over the next few hours, Jake watched Ghost explore the small room. The wolf was careful and methodical, sniffing everything and testing surfaces with his paws. But it wasn't random exploration. Ghost seemed to be mapping the space, understanding how everything connected. The first sign that Ghost was special came that evening. Jake was working on his personal tablet, reviewing technical manuals for the next day's repairs, when Ghost suddenly stood up and walked to the wall. The wolf pressed his ear against the metal and began to whine softly. "What's wrong, boy?" Jake asked, but Ghost just kept staring at the wall. 5 minutes later, Jake's neighbor started banging on the wall. Her air recycling unit had broken down, and her room was getting stuffy. Jake grabbed his tools and helped fix the problem, but he couldn't stop thinking about Ghost's reaction. There was no way the wolf could have heard the failing machinery through the thick walls. The next day, Jake decided to test something. He brought Ghost to work with him, hiding the wolf in a storage locker near his workspace. During his lunch break, Jake let Ghost out to stretch his legs in the empty workshop. Ghost immediately started acting strange again. He walked straight to a massive engine that Jake had been troubleshooting for weeks. The wolf sniffed around the base and then sat down, pointing his nose at a specific section of the machinery. Jake had already checked that area 3 times. But something made him look again. This time he found it. A hairline crack in a power coupling that was so small his instruments had missed it. It would have caused a catastrophic failure within days. "How did you know?" Jake asked, staring at Ghost in amazement. Ghost just wagged his tail and looked proud of himself. From that day on, Jake brought Ghost to work whenever possible. The wolf had an incredible talent for finding problems that others missed. Loose connections, failing components, energy leaks, stress fractures in metal. Ghost could sense them all somehow. But it wasn't just mechanical problems. Ghost seemed to understand Jake's moods and needs in ways that went beyond normal animal behavior. When Jake was stressed about a difficult repair, Ghost would sit quietly beside him, providing calm companionship. When Jake needed to focus, Ghost would lie down and stay perfectly still. When Jake was frustrated and ready to give up, Ghost would nuzzle his hand or do something playfully distracting. The bond between them grew stronger every day. Jake started talking to Ghost like he was a person, explaining his work and his problems. Ghost would listen intently, tilting his head and making soft sounds that almost seemed like responses. Other mechanics began to notice Jake's improved performance. Jobs that used to take him hours were finished in minutes. Equipment that had been acting up for months suddenly worked perfectly after Jake serviced it. Word spread that the human mechanic had somehow gotten much better at his job. Jake never told them about Ghost. He had a feeling that his companion was more than just an unusually smart animal, and he wanted to protect that secret. The galaxy could be a cruel place for anything different or valuable. 3 weeks after bringing Ghost home, Jake made a discovery that changed everything. He was working late in his quarters when his tablet started acting up. The screen flickered and the power indicator showed irregular readings. Jake was about to run diagnostics when Ghost walked over and placed his paw directly on the device. The flickering stopped immediately. The power readings stabilized. Jake stared at the tablet, then at Ghost, then back at the tablet. There was no way that was a coincidence. "Ghost," Jake said slowly, "can you actually sense electrical fields?" Ghost looked at him with both eyes now. The clouded eye had been clearing up over the past few weeks, and Jake could see it wasn't damaged at all. It was different. It almost seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Jake realized he hadn't rescued a broken animal from an alien auction. He'd found a partner whose abilities were beyond anything he could have imagined. Jake's life had completely changed over the past month. What started as fixing broken engines had turned into something that felt almost like magic. Ghost could predict equipment failures days before they happened, find problems that the most advanced scanners missed, and somehow stabilize electrical systems just by being near them. Word was spreading through the station's underground networks. Other mechanics started asking Jake for help with their impossible cases. The jobs that had stumped everyone else for months suddenly became easy when Ghost was around. Jake was careful to keep his companion hidden, but he couldn't hide the results. That's when Dr. Rebecca Stone showed up at his workshop. Jake was elbow-deep in a fusion regulator when he heard an unfamiliar voice behind him. "Excuse me, are you Jake Thompson?" He turned around to see a woman in her 40s wearing a clean lab coat that looked completely out of place in the grimy maintenance levels. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and carried a medical scanner that probably cost more than Jake made in a year. "Depends who's asking," Jake said, wiping his hands on a rag. Ghost was hidden in his usual spot behind a stack of spare parts, but Jake could feel the wolf's tension. "I'm Dr. Stone, Xenobiology Department. I study alien life forms for the station's research division." She looked around the cluttered workshop with obvious curiosity. "I've been hearing some very interesting rumors about you." Jake's heart started beating faster. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that say you've gotten impossibly good at your job in a very short time. The kind that say you can find problems that our best diagnostic equipment misses." She stepped closer, her scanner making soft beeping sounds. "The kind that say you might not be working alone." Before Jake could respond, Ghost stepped out from his hiding spot. The wolf moved with his usual careful grace, but Jake could tell he was ready to run if necessary. Dr. Stone's eyes went wide, and her scanner started beeping frantically. "Oh my," she whispered, staring at the readings. "Oh my goodness." "Look, I can explain," Jake started, but Dr. Stone held up a hand to stop him. "How long have you had him?" she asked, never taking her eyes off Ghost. "About a month. I bought him at the livestock auction. The Zephyrians said he was defective." Dr. Stone actually laughed, a sound of pure amazement. "Defective? Mr. Thompson, do you have any idea what you found?" Jake looked at Ghost, who was watching the conversation with obvious intelligence. I know he's special. He can sense electrical problems, predict equipment failures, somehow stabilize power systems. But I don't know what he actually is. May I scan him? I promise I won't hurt him. Ghost looked at Jake, and Jake could swear the wolf was asking permission. He nodded, and Ghost sat down calmly as Dr. Stone ran her scanner over him. The device went crazy, displaying readings that made the scientist gasp. This is impossible, she muttered, checking the scanner's calibration. According to this, his brain activity is off the charts. His nervous system is generating electromagnetic fields. And these bone structures. She looked up at Jake with excitement. He's not just a wolf. He's a voidkin. A what? Voidkin. They're legendary creatures that most scientists thought were extinct. Maybe even mythical. She sat down on a crate, still staring at Ghost in wonder. The old records describe them as living sensors, capable of detecting dimensional rifts, dark matter fluctuations, and energy patterns that our best instruments can't measure. Jake felt dizzy. Are you saying Ghost can see things that aren't there? I'm saying he can see things that are there, but that we can't detect normally. Dr. Stone leaned forward eagerly. The clouded eye that the Zephyrians thought was a defect? It's not damaged at all. It's evolved to see across multiple spectrums of reality. The limp comes from extra joints that give him incredible flexibility. And his ability to sense electrical problems is just the beginning. As if to demonstrate, Ghost suddenly stood up and walked to a wall panel that Jake had inspected just that morning. The wolf sat down and stared at it intently. What's he doing? Dr. Stone asked. Jake walked over and opened the panel. Inside, he found a small crack in a data cable that hadn't been there before. If left alone, it would have caused a major system failure within hours. He does this constantly, Jake said, feeling a mix of pride and worry. But if he's really this rare, this valuable? You're concerned about what happens when others find out, Dr. Stone finished. You should be. There are people who would pay fortunes for a living voidkin. Military applications alone would be worth billions. Jake knelt down beside Ghost, running his fingers through the wolf's soft fur. Ghost leaned into the touch, completely trusting. The idea of anyone using his companion as a weapon made Jake feel sick. There's something else, Dr. Stone said quietly. My research suggests that the voidkin weren't just rare. They were actively hunted to extinction. By who? The hegemony's predecessors. About 2,000 years ago, there was a galactic war that ended when one side found hidden weapon caches scattered across the galaxy. Ancient technology from a civilization that vanished long before any of our current species evolved. She paused, choosing her words carefully. According to the records, the voidkin were the only creatures capable of detecting these hidden sites. Jake felt cold. So ghosts could find ancient weapons? Potentially, yes. Which is why they were hunted. Someone wanted to make sure those weapons stayed hidden. Dr. Stone stood up and paced around the small workshop. If I'm right, if your ghost really is a pureblood voidkin, then he's not just rare. He's the key to power that could reshape the entire galaxy. As if sensing the conversation was about him, Ghost walked over and sat beside Jake, pressing against his leg. The simple gesture of trust and affection reminded Jake of what really mattered. I don't care about ancient weapons or galactic power, Jake said firmly. Ghost isn't some tool to be used. He's my friend. Dr. Stone smiled sadly. I understand, Mr. Thompson. But I'm afraid the choice might not be yours to make. Word is already spreading about your improved performance. It won't be long before someone connects it to your companion. When that happens, you'll both be in serious danger. Just then, Jake's communicator buzzed with an urgent message. His supervisor wanted to see him immediately. There had been questions about his recent work quality. Questions from people higher up the chain of command. Jake looked at Ghost, who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The wolf's ears were pressed back and his good eye was darting toward the exits. What do I do? Jake asked. Dr. Stone gathered her equipment. For now, keep him hidden and act normal. I'll do some discreet research and see what I can find out. But Mr. Thompson? She paused at the door. Start thinking about what you'll do if you need to run. Because if the wrong people find out about Ghost, nowhere in civilized space will be safe for either of you. After she left, Jake sat in his workshop with Ghost's head resting on his lap. A month ago, his biggest worry was making rent. Now he was apparently harboring one of the rarest creatures in the galaxy, with abilities that could change the balance of power among the stars. But looking down at Ghost's trusting face, Jake knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Jake tried to act normal during the meeting with his supervisor, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Commander Hayes, a gruff former military man who ran the maintenance division, had received reports about Jake's unusual improvement in work performance. There were questions from the station administrator's office. People wanted to know how a simple mechanic had suddenly become capable of solving problems that stumped entire engineering teams. "Look, Thompson," Hayes said, leaning back in his chair, "I don't care if you've been studying in your spare time or taking enhancement drugs. Your work quality has gone through the roof, and that's good for everyone. But when the brass starts asking questions, I need answers." Jake forced himself to stay calm. "I've just been paying more attention to details, sir. Learning from experience." Hayes didn't look convinced, but he waved Jake away. "Fine. Keep doing whatever you're doing. Just don't make me look stupid when the big shots come asking." Jake hurried back to his quarters, his mind racing. Ghost was waiting for him, and the moment Jake walked in, the wolf pressed against his leg. Somehow, Ghost always knew when Jake was stressed. "We might have a problem, boy," Jake said, scratching behind Ghost's ears. "People are starting to notice." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. Every sound in the corridor outside made him jump. He kept thinking about what Dr. Stone had said about the Voidkin being hunted to extinction. Was history about to repeat itself? His answer came at 3 a.m. Jake woke to Ghost growling low and deep, a sound he'd never heard before. The wolf was standing by the door, every muscle tensed. His clouded eye was glowing faintly, something that had been happening more often lately. Then Jake heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside, moving too quietly for maintenance workers or late-shift crew. These were people trying not to be heard. Jake quickly got dressed and grabbed his emergency kit, a habit he'd developed working in dangerous areas of the station. He also picked up the small plasma torch he used for repairs. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The footsteps stopped right outside his door. Ghost's growling grew more intense, and Jake could feel something strange happening. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with energy. Ghost's fur was standing on end, not from fear but from some kind of electromagnetic charge building up around him. "Security inspection," a voice called through the door. "Open up, Thompson." Jake's blood ran cold. Security inspections didn't happen at 3 a.m. unless something was very wrong. And the voice had an accent he didn't recognize. "Not station security." "Just a minute," Jake called back, trying to sound sleepy and confused. He looked at Ghost and whispered, "We need to go. Now." Ghost seemed to understand perfectly. The wolf moved to the ventilation grate near Jake's bed, the one Jake had loosened months ago as an emergency exit. It led to the maintenance tunnels that ran throughout the station's lower levels. The door chimed again, more insistent this time. "Open immediately or we will override the lock." Jake quickly removed the grate and lifted Ghost into the tunnel. The wolf's compact size and extra joints let him move through the narrow space easily. Jake squeezed in after him, replacing the grate just as he heard his door being forced open. The maintenance tunnels were dark and cramped, filled with pipes, cables, and air ducts. Jake had explored them extensively during his 3 years on the station, but now he was grateful for Ghost's abilities. The wolf's enhanced senses guided them through the maze of passages, avoiding areas where Jake could hear voices and footsteps. They made their way toward the central hub where the tunnels connected to other sections of the station. Jake's plan was to reach Dr. Stone's laboratory and figure out what was happening. But Ghost suddenly stopped and pressed himself against the tunnel wall, trembling. Jake listened carefully and heard voices echoing from somewhere ahead. "Spread out. Check every access point. The creature has to be here somewhere." "What exactly are we looking for again?" "Some kind of animal the human acquired illegally. Intelligence says it has value to certain parties. We bring it back alive, no questions asked." Jake's heart pounded. They weren't station security at all. These were bounty hunters or mercenaries, and they were specifically after Ghost. Someone had sold them out. Ghost's clouded eye was glowing brighter now, and Jake realized the wolf was somehow sensing the locations of their pursuers through the electromagnetic signatures of their equipment. Ghost could track their movements through the station's electrical systems. Using hand signals he'd improvised over the past month, Jake asked Ghost to lead them away from the voices. The wolf nodded and began moving through a different series of tunnels, ones that led toward the outer ring of the station. For the next 2 hours they played a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every time Jake thought they'd found a safe route, Ghost would alert him to more hunters ahead. The mercenaries had night vision equipment and energy scanners, but Ghost's abilities let Jake stay one step ahead. Finally, they reached an emergency communications panel in a rarely used section of the lower decks. Jake activated it and tried to contact Dr. Stone, hoping her laboratory's secured channel would be safe. Dr. Stone, this is Jake Thompson. Are you there? Static filled the channel for several seconds before her voice came through, tense and worried. Jake? Where are you? There are armed men searching the research levels. They're asking about you and your companion. We're in the maintenance tunnels. How did they find out about Ghost? I don't know, but it gets worse. I've been monitoring station communications. There are Zephyrian legal teams demanding your companion's return. They claim the original sale was fraudulent. And there are hegemony ships approaching the station. Jake felt the walls closing in around them. What do we do? I'm sending you coordinates to a service bay near the docking rings. There's a maintenance pod there that might give you options. But Jake, you need to understand something. This isn't just about Ghost anymore. My research has uncovered evidence that there are other Voidkin on the station. Creatures sold as defective pets or livestock, hidden in plain sight. Jake looked at Ghost, who was listening intently to the conversation. The wolf's expression seemed almost human in its understanding of their desperate situation. How many others? At least 5, maybe more. And if the wrong people get their hands on even one Voidkin, they'll have the ability to locate those ancient weapon sites I told you about. Jake, we're not just running for Ghost's life anymore. We might be running to prevent a war. The communication channel crackled with interference, and Jake heard Dr. Stone curse softly. They're jamming communications. I have to go. Get to those coordinates and stay hidden. And Jake? That bond you have with Ghost? It's not just emotional. According to my scans, you two have developed some kind of neural link. That connection might be the key to everything. The channel went dead, leaving Jake and Ghost alone in the dark tunnels with the sound of approaching footsteps echoing from multiple directions. Ghost pressed against Jake's side, and suddenly Jake could sense what the wolf was feeling. Fear, yes, but also determination and absolute loyalty. They were in this together no matter what came next. All right, boy, Jake whispered, checking his plasma torch and gathering his courage. Let's go find our pack. Jake and Ghost made their way through the darkest parts of the station's maintenance tunnels, following the coordinates Dr. Stone had given them. The service bay was in an older section where broken equipment went to be scrapped or forgotten. It was perfect for hiding, but Jake knew they couldn't stay there forever. The maintenance pod Dr. Stone had mentioned was exactly where she said it would be. It was small, barely big enough for 2 people, and looked like it hadn't been used in years. But when Jake powered it up, the systems came online. It had basic life support, communications, and enough fuel for short-range travel. This could get us off the station, Jake told Ghost. But then what? We'd be fugitives for the rest of our lives. Ghost tilted his head and made a soft whining sound. His clouded eye was glowing steadily now, and Jake could feel something through their strange connection. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was longing. Ghost was sensing something nearby, something important. What is it, boy? What do you feel? Ghost walked to the far corner of the service bay and sat down, staring at a wall that separated them from the station's cargo holds. His whole body was tense with excitement. Jake followed and pressed his ear against the wall. He could hear faint sounds from the other side. Movement. Possibly voices. But there was something else, something he felt rather than heard. A vibration that seemed to resonate with Ghost's presence. Are there others like you over there? Jake asked. Ghost's tail wagged once, and Jake felt a surge of certainty through their bond. Yes, there were other Voidkin nearby. Jake spent the next hour studying the station's layout on the pod's computer. The cargo hold on the other side of the wall was registered to a merchant trader who specialized in exotic livestock. According to the records, the trader had been on the station for weeks, waiting for buyers. That's where they're keeping the others, Jake realized. Hidden right under everyone's nose. But rescuing them would be almost impossible. The cargo hold was in a high-security area with multiple checkpoints. Jake was just one human with basic tools, going up against professional bounty hunters and possibly military forces. That's when Jake made a decision that would change everything. He activated the pod's communication system and began broadcasting on every frequency he could access. Not just to the station but to ships in the area and relay stations that would spread the signal across the galaxy. This is Jake Thompson, speaking from Nexus Station. He began, his voice shaking with nerves but growing stronger with each word. A month ago, I bought what aliens called a defective wolf from an auction. They said he was worthless, damaged, unwanted. Ghost sat beside him, seeming to understand the importance of what Jake was doing. They were wrong. This animal, this incredible creature, isn't defective at all. His name is Ghost and he's a Voidkin, one of the rarest and most amazing species in the galaxy. He can sense things our instruments can't detect. He can find problems before they become disasters. He can see across dimensions of reality that we don't even have names for. Jake's hands were steady now as he continued the broadcast. But here's the thing that matters most. Ghost isn't valuable because of what he can do for us. He's valuable because of who he is. He's intelligent, loyal, and capable of bonds with other species that go beyond anything we thought possible. And right now, there are people trying to capture him and others like him, not to study them or protect them, but to use them as weapons. The communication system showed that his broadcast was being picked up and relayed across multiple networks. Ships were stopping to listen. News services were recording. The entire galaxy was suddenly paying attention to a human mechanic and his white wolf. "I'm not a scientist or a diplomat or a soldier," Jake continued. "I'm just a guy who fixes engines. But I know right from wrong, and what's happening here is wrong. These creatures aren't tools to be used or weapons to be unleashed. They're living beings with their own thoughts and feelings and rights to exist freely." Ghost stood up and walked to the communication console, placing his paw on Jake's hand. Through their bond, Jake felt the wolf's encouragement and something else. Trust. Complete, absolute trust. "So I'm making this broadcast to show the galaxy what we're really dealing with," Jake said. "Ghost, can you show them?" Ghost's clouded eye began to glow brighter, and suddenly the pod's instruments went crazy. Energy readings spiked off the charts. The communication system's range amplified dramatically. And through the walls, Jake could hear responses. Other voidkin in the cargo hold were calling back, their voices carrying harmonics that made the station's metal structure ring like a bell. The broadcast was no longer just audio. Ghost was somehow transmitting electromagnetic signatures that revealed the location of every voidkin on the station. The hidden creatures in the cargo hold, a few in the upper-level pet shops, even one in the diplomatic quarters that had been disguised as an exotic decoration. "Do you hear that?" Jake asked his galactic audience. "That's not just animal sounds. That's communication. That's intelligence. That's a family calling to each other across barriers meant to keep them apart." Alarms started blaring throughout the station as the voidkin chorus grew louder. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically as electromagnetic fields fluctuated beyond safe parameters. But it wasn't destruction. It was revelation. Every hidden voidkin on the station was broadcasting their presence, their intelligence, their desire for freedom. "The auction records are public," Jake continued as chaos erupted around him. "Check them. See how many defective animals have been sold, discarded, or destroyed because they didn't meet someone's idea of perfection. See how many incredible creatures have been lost because no one bothered to look past surface flaws to see the miracle underneath." His communication system showed incoming messages from across the galaxy. News services wanting interviews. Scientists demanding data. Military forces asking about weapons applications. But also something else. Messages of support from ordinary beings on dozens of worlds who understood what it meant to be dismissed or undervalued. "I don't know how this ends," Jake said as security forces finally broke into the service bay. "But I know it starts with one simple idea. Every living being has value. Every creature deserves a chance to be understood before being judged. And sometimes the most important discoveries come not from looking up at the stars, but from looking down at those society has forgotten." Ghost pressed against Jake's side as armed figures surrounded them. But the wolf wasn't afraid anymore. Neither was Jake. They had done something that couldn't be undone. The galaxy now knew the truth about the voidkin. 6 months later, Jake stood on the porch of a small research station on a frontier world, watching Ghost lead a pack of rescued voidkin across rolling hills. Dr. Stone worked nearby, studying the creatures' abilities while ensuring their freedom and safety. The broadcast had changed everything. Laws were passed protecting endangered species. Auction practices were reformed. The definition of defective was challenged on worlds across the galaxy. Jake had become something he never expected. Not just a mechanic but a bridge between species. A voice for the voiceless. A reminder that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or weapons, but the ability to see value where others saw only flaws. As Ghost returned from leading his pack, eyes bright and tail wagging, Jake realized that sometimes saving one creature was really about saving them all. Including yourself. The bond between them had grown into something larger. A connection between species. A hope for understanding. A pact that spanned the stars. And it had all started with one human who couldn't walk away from a frightened animal in a cage.